Have at her.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to episode one of the Clown Fiesta podcast, hosted by myself, Blue Jay, and of course my co-host JNT250. JNT, you want to take it away and let people know exactly what to expect from our podcast?
Oh, sure, Mr. Savoy. So basically, the primary topic of what we're going to be doing throughout the entirety of this podcast is covering the NALCS and the majority of mainstream law topics. For the most part, it's just going to be myself and Blue Jay doing this on a weekly basis, but we're definitely going to have guests. Looking forward to future episodes.
Yep, perfect. And so, if without further ado, I think we should just get right into it then. First topic, you good with that?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's get her going. So first thing first, we don't want to take too much time on, but is Avi Lee is no longer part of the LCS broadcast. She seems to have gone independent without saying she's going independent. She's basically saying that she's going to stick around with and do some LCS content, but we'll have to wait and see exactly how involved she's going to be. She's been around for quite a while now, so her leaving the LCS is kind of a big deal, but kind of not because she says that we should still expect to see her content in the LCS.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, I think she came on towards the end of season 8 summer, and she was definitely it was good. She was like a fresh new face in terms of like the broadcasting team on the LCS, and she definitely was more of the type of interviewer to, be very playful and, try to get the players to show their personality a little bit more during their interviews as opposed to more like analytical interviews. And so in that regard, she was enjoyed in the majority of the LCS community because people did like to see, that side of players.
Yeah, definitely one of the better memers the LCS has in their broadcast team. But the good thing is that she won't be going too far. Another thing that we want to get into is that Monday Night League is no longer going to be a thing, or at least not for the time being. It looks like they're pushing all Monday night games over to Friday night. What do you think about the change?
Definitely think it was good. Monday Night League sort of seemed kind of weird. Like
Yeah,
I remember when they first announced it, I thought it was going to be kind of a cool thing, just like from being an NFL
same.
fan. Like you have your Thursday night games in the NFL and then all of them Sunday, and then you have one Monday night primetime game, and it it had that feel sort of at the start when they had like marquee matchups. Like I think if I remember correctly, like TSM versus TL was like one of the first Monday Night League games, but like with so many, like since you have to get everybody involved in those Monday Night League games, not all of them are going to be as exciting and as hype as others. So, sort of like once like week 3 to 4 hit and you had teams, it was like, I don't know, just if it was like CLG versus 100
Yeah.
Thieves on like a Monday Night League game, like that's not something like super exciting that like makes me go want to watch Monday Night League. And especially since it was during the work week or school week for people, it wasn't necessarily like something that people really wanted to go out of their way to watch. Whereas Friday, it's so much easier uh, for people to tune into as they don't have to worry about school or work. Obviously, depending on what you're doing, but
Yeah.
I think it's a good change.
So me too. I definitely think it's a good change, and I totally agree. It felt like they were trying to be Monday Night Football, but they didn't have the matchups to make it Monday Night Football. Like there's just not enough of a following for the lower tier teams. And one of the best things I think about this change is that you can now kind of, well, I think you should be able to follow with the LEC viewage, but if you look at the schedule, there's like a 5 hour gap between the last LEC match and the first LCS match. So to me, kind of a missed opportunity. Maybe they have something in mind that they want to have in that window, but I don't see them having 5 hours of content to fill that void and have the transition of LEC viewers come right over to LCS. So to me, it seems like a missed opportunity, but I can't say I'm sitting down at the LCS meeting, so maybe they have something planned. We'll have to wait and see, but definitely think Friday night is better. And with that said, I also noticed the LEC is changing their Thursday Friday schedule over to a Friday Saturday Sunday schedule as well as the LCS. So on Saturdays and Sundays, the LCS will be able to sort of borrow the viewers that the LEC has, which I thought was something a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I think the main reason for that is when they sort of made when the transition back in season 8 was made when NALCS started franchising and they just became the LCS. It was no longer the NALCS and the EULCS. And then in season 9 we saw when, the EULCS rebranded into the LEC. It was sort of, I would assume, an understanding back in those previous seasons because they were both run and worked together by Riot. So they had it so it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to make it nice and even. So
Yeah.
now that, sort of both the leagues are their own brand themselves, it makes a lot of sense that they've switched to this different schedule because number one, their viewership is much higher than the LCS, especially for their marquee matchups. And they have many more marquee matchups than the NALCS. Like people don't really care, for the big matchups. People only really care to see C9, TSM, and TL. Whereas now in EU, you have plenty of top teams in that league that people want to go see. So I think it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense for them to switch their schedule because, they're their own brand now and they have more viewers. So
Yeah, and just one quick last thing on that topic before we move on to our next topic is that, so like I was saying, there's a 5-hour window, but the Friday Night League won't start until 9 p.m. EST. So they're going for more of a late night feel, which I think that's perfectly fine. I think that the demographic that is watching is usually staying up later than the rest of other demographics, I suppose. So I don't think that they need to follow suit in like um, traditional sports times. So I think that it's good that they're going for kind of a late night feel. We'll see what kind of effect that has on viewage. Um, Next up is co-streaming is now approved for summer 2020. What are your thoughts there?
definitely good. Um, for myself, being a very long time LCS viewer, it's definitely easy to, get the broadcast can feel a little bit stale when you have the same personalities that are doing, just they're always there 24/7. So when co-streaming first came out, when they were doing various finals, um, and it was approved much earlier in EU than it was in NA. It kind of just gave a fresh look and different options that viewers could turn to for their League of Legends pro content. Like for myself, towards the end of spring 2020, I more tuned into, LS's co-streams as opposed to the regular broadcast team because I felt personally that I could understand and get more out of watching that broadcast as opposed to just the regular LCS broadcast.
Yeah, and do you want to also just explain real quick exactly what co-streaming is? Because there's a question in chat which I think is fair. We should bring up exactly what that is and what that's going to mean for the LCS moving forward.
Yeah, but co-streaming is pretty much that other content creators are allowed to stream themselves watching uh, the professional games. Originally, you were allowed to do it where you had to have like face cam full screen or you couldn't even show the broadcast at all. And so I remember when LS was originally doing it, what he had was he just had like his face cam, his chat, and like his game timer pulled up on his screen so that you could sync it with him. But now it's actually been approved where you can have the stream on, you can, you know, record the broadcast itself on your stream and then you talking over it.
Right. So pretty much, if I want to go, we keep bringing up LS because he's pretty much the most popular co-streamer, at least from my point of view. Maybe there's others. Oh, well, I know there's others, but maybe not as popular as LS. But basically, I can go to LS's stream, and the LCS can utilize his following to get more viewers into the LCS broadcast. Which, in my opinion, I think that might actually completely change. We will see, but that could completely change how esports are viewed as a whole. If there's really big influencers that can bring in way more viewers than just the actual broadcast would on its own, I think you'll start to see more and more influencers want to co-stream, and I think that you'll see a lot of dispersion of viewers across all those different channels, which should be pretty interesting. Um, Imagine if Tyler One eventually wants to do a co-stream, or if I don't know, name an influencer. There's a bunch of them, right? So something should be pretty interesting, and another notable name is I Will Dominate as well. He also does a co-stream and has a respectable amount of viewers tune into his stream while watching the LCS. So we'll have to see what that looks like moving forward. But again, I think it'll probably revolutionize how esports are viewed.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that, again, for me personally, that I really love about the various co-streams is that with the LCS broadcast, it is talked about and like the way they portray themselves. It's it's league at more of a rudimentary level because they want to be very viewer friendly. They want to be very inclusive. They want the LCS broadcast to be something that any League of Legends player, or maybe even if they haven't even seen League, as you know, like they put the playoffs on ESPN last split. So they had a lot of new viewers coming in and they wanted to keep it somewhat basic in terms of because they obviously want their broadcast to be understood by anybody who's watching. So one thing that again you get from Dom or LS's co-streams that you can find is they do like a deep dive usually into all like the draft analysis, like they're giving their 2 cents on what they think teams should be picking and
Yeah.
who thinks they won this draft, whereas just watching like the LCS and what they talk about during draft is much more rudimentary in comparison to what the co-streamers seem to be doing.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Are we ready to move on to the big bulk of our episode?
I guess just one more last point on that, and
Yep, go
you
for it.
already touched on it, was that, dispersion of viewers and, how that sort of affects the LCS broadcast. And because if I remember correctly, I think LS was usually pulling somewhere around like 20 to 30K viewers every time he did a co-stream, and Dom would have another 10 to 15K. And like you said, imagine if somebody like Tyler One did a co-stream. I would considering how many viewers Tyler One just gets on a regular basis, he usually gets like 20 to 30K viewers. Like if he did a
Hmm.
co-stream, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he pulled more viewers in the actual broadcast itself.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. And actually, on that note, last week LS was talking about how he actually peaked when he had double lift on his stream, and for the co-stream, he actually peaked. I think he said like 43 or 48K, somewhere in between there, viewers, which is like that is substantial viewership.
Yeah, that's another thing that LS, regularly does that I also like to hear is he does bring in a lot of pro players to discuss with him while he's watching all these games. I know like when he is doing when he's watching NA, he'll sometimes have Nemesis on, who's the mid laner for Fnatic. He sometimes has Crown Shot, who's the ADC for SK. Some of his good friends, and then like you said, he got double lift. I think when it was FlyQuest versus TSM playoffs. Just yeah, just the ability to give your own 2 cents on it and be able to bring other people in to discuss with you does add a lot of value.
For sure, for sure. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the bulk of our episode. Our next topic is power rankings,
Yeah,
and most of you in the chat will know exactly how fired up I get for power rankings.
Jamie's Blue Jays' favorite thing to do, talk about them power rankings. So we'll pull them up on screen right now, just for you guys to see.
We'll go from 10th to first. We'll go that route.
Yeah, we'll go bottom to top. Oh wait,
Okay.
it disappeared. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're both in agreement. Last place team, CLG.
Oh man, where do you start with CLG, man? So this is a team that started off struggling right out of the gate to start the spring split, and there was a little bit of hope mid-season when they got rid of Crown. You know, they brought in Poe Belter, they won a game. I think that was the game that they beat TL. Was that the game that they beat TL, or maybe it was TSM? Maybe
Hmm.
you can refresh my memory there. Anyways, it was a notable game. It was a really huge pop-off performance by Poe Belter. Everyone thought we were seeing the savior of CLG, and then they like never really won any more games after that. And so you would think that finishing dead last, winning 3 games over the spring split, you would think they would make some move. However, they decided to make no moves going into summer split.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't know what's going on internally with CLG, so it's always hard to judge from the outside looking in, but it was kind of
Yeah.
surprising that your team finished last place, had the worst record by far in 3 and 15, and honestly probably should have had a worse record because two of their wins were actually against TL and TSM, which you can sort of, relate to their dysfunction.
I would say let's say could have instead of
Okay.
should have.
Could have,
Yeah.
yeah, that, I guess. But one thing I think last split in particular, why we'll discuss this later, but why the standings were so messed up is due to a lot of the dysfunction in some of the teams at the top end, and how that sort of affected the standings. But yeah, back to CLG, it just does in my view it just doesn't make sense how you finish last place, dead last, and you make no roster moves going forward into the next split. We did see, a little bit of hope from them when they did sign Pobelter. I think they started off the season 06 with Crown before they made the replacement, or it might have been 08. I don't exactly remember, but and they sort of attributed that to Crown's, communication and, you know, they obviously that has got to do with some of the language barrier, but uh, just from my perspective, it doesn't seem like all of that is should be put on Crown because they did have multiple underperforming players like
Yeah,
Ruin,
absolutely.
like Wiggly, Smoothie had a pretty lackluster split.
Well,
Stixay didn't look that good to be honest, but he's definitely the
right.
best player on that team.
And well, the thing to me is that you definitely can't blame it all on Crown because after he left, it's not like they started winning a bunch of games. Nothing really changed. They
Yeah.
were still the dumpster fire of the league, and they sat right in 10th for the whole split. So if you're a CLG fan, I don't know what kind of hope you have if you finish 10th and your org makes no moves going into the next split. I don't know what CLG fans have to look forward to.
Like I'm just trying to picture like in any other, esport or even like professional sports league, like whenever you see a team finish dead last, there are almost always major changes that they go through. And it's just to see this situation where they don't make any roster moves whatsoever, it just, really doesn't make sense. And I guess they have faith in themselves. Still, I'm
Nice.
I'm still sort of surprised. Like their head coach, what's his name, Weldon.
Yeah.
Like I'm still kind of surprised that that guy is a head coach. I guess I don't know. He's got like I know he's like a more of a sports psychologist kind of guy, but he's got little to no league info. So
Yeah, and something that you did touch on is the fact that we don't know what their meetings were like. Maybe they made an effort to go grab some all-star player, who knows? Maybe they tried to make a splash, but one thing we know for certain is that it didn't happen and that the outlook isn't so good going into summer split.
and while that could be true, I do find it. I feel like there are multiple academy talents that they could have gotten. Again, maybe they tried and it didn't work out, but I think, they had, Wiggly and Ruin, I think were really underperforming and were, one of the worst performing players in their position, and Smoothie wasn't doing so hot as well. So again, like
Yeah,
this is sort of a problem that, is being brought up a lot within NA is sort of recycling the same old players and not willing to, just invest money or just throw in new talent. And I think, CLG is a prime example where they've hit rock bottom and you're not helping the situation by just running it back with the same roster. Like
yeah,
maybe like I know it's summer split and potentially they want to make some worlds push, like that's not going to happen, but and again, who knows, but I don't think it's going to happen, but like at this point I think it adds more value to just throw in some young rookies to either gain experience or just, find out whatever you need to find out about these players to see if they're even worth putting any time and effort into.
yeah. I do agree. I do agree. Anything else before we move on to our ninth place team?
Uh, no, CLG's dog. Move on.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of dog, Immortals has come in on the ninth spot. A few things to note with Immortals. They've had some issues, or some rumors, we will say. It has been rumored that they will not be starting Xmithy, or may not be starting Xmithy in this upcoming split. Um, I was listening to another podcast, which will not be named, hosted by Travis Gafford, and Travis Gafford was saying that the rumor is Xmithy showed up intoxicated to one of their scrims, and that he may not be starting the season. Now, to me, I think he was one of their brighter spots on the roster for Immortals to have some hope. And without Xmithy in the jungle, I don't know where that team is going to find success.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think Smithy was, you know, their best performing player on their team. They had sort of a lackluster performance from Ika, whatever you want to call him, uh,
Aka,
Aka. And,
I got you.
yeah, they had sort of a lackluster performance from Aka and Soaz. Soaz was sort of he was known in EU just to sort of be this rock that you can put in the top lane, and he's gonna, do his own thing, and he's not gonna lose his lane, but he's not necessarily gonna win his lane. He's just kind of gonna go even, do his role, and then, assist the team in any way possible. And it was sort of what we expected from him. I think he had a little bit of a dip in performance from what we've seen
Yeah.
from from what we've seen in EU. But I mean, I think he's a solid top laner. I think he'll be fine moving forward. But I do think that Immortal's problems, at least this coming split, will stem from sort of mid jungle, as Aka wasn't, you know, he wasn't at the top of the mid lane, and potentially Smithy not being there.
Yeah, and some other things to note that were also rumored um, is that Hakuho and Apollo were not part of their scrims as of late, which leaves the question who's going to be starting in the bot lane. And the thoughts are maybe that it's names here,
Yeah,
Altec and Gate
that's their academy duo.
might be filling the bot lane role, but that is still we'll have to wait until Friday, Saturday, Sunday to find out who they intend on having start. However, I don't think with either bot lane it's nothing to be incredibly excited about anyways. I don't know if you share those thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, from what we've seen in past LCS performances, Apollo and Hakuo were sort of they're a solid LCS duo, but again, nothing special. And we've sort of seen, especially in this last season, just truly how important mid jungle is. And it kind of just shows like the top of the team, the top teams in the last split were teams with a very strong mid jungle.
Yep.
So while their ballad is solid, while their uh, bot lane is solid, I don't think it will have too much of an effect on their overall performance and record.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Um, Another thing that I actually wanted to point out was even though there wasn't a large sample size of games for Apollo last split, he actually performed a lot better than he has historically. I think it was only 5 games. Someone can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 5 games. And I remember him actually performing really, really well. And I don't, that doesn't give me any reason to put them higher on my power rankings simply because we've seen Apollo for years and years. You kind of know what you're going to get, but it does give a little bit of hope of maybe he's found something where he can get a little bit more motivation to practice more, something along those lines because he did look good. Mind you, it was only 5 games, so we'll see what kind of version of Apollo we can come to expect later in the split.
Yeah, I also do think like even just last split, like Altec was their starting AD at the time. It was Altec and Hakuho that was their starting bot lane, and then they subbed in Apollo later in the season. So, and for me, again, I didn't really understand their reasons for subbing out Altec in the first place. But like you said, Apollo did have, you know, a decent performance that was, worth, I think, the
Yeah,
substitution. But it's sort of interesting that they're potentially now moving back to their original AD and Altec, and then, Academy Support Gate, who again
yeah.
is another, like, he's a LCS journeyman, so to speak. He's been on a ton of teams, played multiple positions. He's fairly knowledgeable with the game, but again, nothing super special. And I think if you take a look at this Immortals roster as a whole, it's nothing special with a potentially lackluster mid jungle with Xmithy leaving. So I think that can, be problematic for them moving forward.
Yeah, and that's my biggest reason for putting them low on the list is that we don't even know who they have starting, and like the season is so close to beginning. I really hope they have a plan because it doesn't seem like they have anything too special coming out. But that's all I got for Immortals. Did you have anything else before we want to move on to our next team?
No, I think that's good.
All right, we'll follow off of your list then. We'll go with the 8 spot. You had Dig.
Yeah, I had Dig at 8 and you had Dig at 7.
Right.
Just roster uh, their roster changes that they did throughout the offseason. Hooney's now gone, went over to EG, and supposedly with that they had offloaded his contract and then gotten and then with EG had restructured that, $2.3 million contract, which was obviously the general public now thinks that what a damn waste of money.
So sure, however, I hear that they did not have to pay the full 2.3 to his contract. So
Well, yeah,
while yeah, a
it was
waste of money even for the first split, like I get your point,
yeah,
it's still
it
a
was
waste of money.
it was over two
But yeah,
years, so they were never
just want
expected
to
to
be
pay the full
yeah,
thing.
I just want to be clear that the 2.3 million was not fully paid to Hooney. That's I just wanted to
Yeah, yeah.
make sure that point was made clear.
Mhm.
With Dignitas though, like this team is so weird to me, and I'll explain what I mean. Like I'm actually really excited for this team, mostly because I don't know where the hell to put. Like I didn't know where to put them. I could have put them anywhere from 5 all the way to 10, because I think there's such a variation on where this team could fall. I think that they got rid of a lot of the problems that they had, and I know this sounds harsh, but a lot of the problems was Hooney, in my opinion. He took up a lot of resources and wanted to play carry champions and like never really did much with them. So I think that getting rid of your problems are step one to improving. The only reason I still have them low on the power rankings, for me, I had them 7, is just because you need to replace them with something of of substance before you can say, "Way to go, you fix your problem." So we're gonna see. It should be between Lorlo and Viper fighting for that top lane spot. With Dardoch coming in, we're gonna see him and Acadian fighting for that jungle spot. And I'd be really interested to see if it is Lorlo and Dardoch, because as a lot of people know, the old TL team, way back to the Breaking Point days, um, Lorlo and Dardoch were two of best friends, and I know that doesn't sound like anything to get excited about. However, in my opinion, one of the reasons people talk so highly of G2 all the time isn't just because they're great players. They're great players that also get along well, and they say that that's one of the things that leads to their success. The only issue is Dignitas, maybe they have some camaraderie, but you need the talent in order to be good. So we'll see how well they play together if they are the starters. But that's some of the reasons why I'm really excited for this team, is because it's not an obvious. There's no obvious spot to peg them on the power rankings, and so I'm really looking forward to see what this team does.
Yeah, like you mentioned, they added Viper in top lane for potentially fighting for a starting spot. Dardoch as well, potentially fighting for a starting spot. And one just you missed out or didn't talk about was JJ
Yep.
for support that they added. So I think it's really interesting what Dignitas is doing in terms of, they're 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 adding these players to fight for starting spots, and I guess sort of, just bringing in more competition in hopes to, I think, bring out the best performance in all of these players. Because if they know that their starting spot
Yep.
isn't potentially guaranteed, they're going to be going full out 100%. And we've sort of seen in the past how, potentially adding some competition into your team can, aid players in improving their skills. I remember way back in the day with, like, in season 5 TSM when they added Keith, because they were telling Turtle that he wasn't playing well and they were thinking about benching him, and they added Keith, and then Keith came in for TSM and played well, but the Turtle got that starting spot back. But I do think I'm really interested to see where Dignitas goes with adding these players and, trying to create this competition in their team to improve.
So I just want to touch on that point here for a second, because I do agree with you. However, last split, the Dig Academy team was like an LCS team playing in Academy. So you kind of got to wonder if that competition is enough for them to really, uh, pull up their socks, so to speak. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're not. Yeah, I like I said, I do agree with you. I do think that competition is one of the best motivators. However, it didn't seem to do too much for them last split, and it makes me question as to how much that's going to help them moving forward.
Yeah, but I think it'll be really interesting just to see what roster Dig fields in week 1, and then tracking how these various rosters perform. Like, it's not like we got to see if, they're maybe just running with like a 6-man roster, or who knows, maybe all of these different players might get subbed in at a time, and with the
Yeah,
substitutions, how those are going to work. Like, is it okay, 1 week we're going to run the roster of, like, Lorlo, Dardoch, and JJ, and then the next one we're going to sub all three of those out and go to Viper, Acadian, Aframu. Like, we'll have to
yeah,
see whether they're rotating them in as a group of three or individually, because we sort of saw
yeah.
that back with C9, with Golden Glue Svenskeren and then Jensen Blabber. They were sort of a duo where they would always come in together until later they sort of figure out they had to roll with Jensen, Svenskeren, but it's interesting to see if they're gonna group them together as a trio or do it individually.
Yeah, and one quick thing I want to talk about before moving on, I want to get your prediction as to what lineup do you think we're gonna see starting this week.
I'll go with we'll go with Lorlo, Afro, and Acadian.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Lorlo, Dardoch, and JJ. I think they're gonna try a clean sweep, see how it goes, because their mentality to me has seemed very much, look, let's clean house as to what happened last split. Let's forget about it and let's try something new. I would not be surprised to see the other three starting this week, but that's what I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with those three, and we'll see how Dignitas feels about their lineup though in the week coming up. Um, Moving on, next team on our list. Who do we got?
On mine, we got Golden Guardians, number 7.
Yeah,
So just outside of the playoff picture,
Golden Guardians.
whereas you have
So,
them in the playoff picture.
yes, I have them sliding in just barely. I think they did look a little bit better towards the end of the split. If I remember correctly, they just squeaked in. I think they were one of those teams that kind of needed everything to go their way, and it kind of did, and then they just snuck in. Didn't really do too much in playoffs, if my memory's correct. However, like I said, I did think the team was better, and I think uh, this was something that was brought up a lot last split. But Golden Glue's isolated deaths were, well, there was a lot of them. To be frank, there was a lot of them, and so you got to wonder if bringing in Demonte and he's possibly the starter, if that's something that can improve the team. Because I don't think Demonte is much worse if worse at all than Golden Glue. I think that they're pretty similar in skill level, and I think that people were expecting to see a little bit more out of Golden Glue last split after being under C9's coaching and tutelage, if you want to so to speak, for a couple of years. I thought I was going to see a little bit more out of Golden Glue, and I think that the change to Demonte is warranted, I would say.
I was just checking to see what their finish in the playoffs was, and they got 3 out by FlyQuest in
Yeah.
the first round of the playoffs as the 6th seed. So, like you said, I do think it was sort of, you know, everything sort of fell correctly for them, and they were able to squeak into the playoffs, having been outside the playoff picture almost the entirety of the split. And I do think with a lot of these teams, like this sort of grouping of Dignitas, Immortals, Golden Guardians, like they all three of those teams were 8 and 10 at the end of last split. So it did, and some of that obviously was due to TL's failures. They got those bottom teams got like all at least they all got one win at least off of TL. So I think, assuming that TL is, better performing and we have a better picture of what the top looks like, it makes the bottom, a little more unpredictable just because we don't
Hmm.
exactly know how these teams are going to shake up.
Yeah,
But
I also I didn't catch if you mentioned Keith at all. Did we talk about that?
no, but I'm pretty sure he's not starting. It's going to be
Right.
Huhi.
Yeah, and so not that who he's anything spectacular. He was, I would say, subpar. His last time when he was starting in the LCS for Golden Guardians as a support, he wasn't anything amazing. However, I think he did have a little bit more time practiced in the role, and as a lot of people have said it, I don't think it was necessarily fair for what happened to Keith. Um, they did ask him. It was all uploaded for whatever reason. They decided to upload that YouTube video where they showed exactly what the process was of bringing in Keith as support. And so they did ask him if he was comfortable playing support and so on and so forth. However, um, for what he did last split and to still get benched, like the point has been brought up many times, and I can't agree more. Like, if that was a failure and what he did was to lead for him to be benched, like, in what scenario is he not going to get benched? Like, what were they thinking they were going to get out of Keith last split? Like, I think he performed a lot better than people were expecting for someone who's been playing 80 carry their whole career. But again, yeah, I don't think it was necessarily fair what happened to Keith for him to perform better than he should have been expected to and still to get benched. So it makes you wonder what the decision making process is like at Golden Guardians because I don't know what they were expecting.
Yeah, you mentioned the video that they uploaded to their YouTube channel, it was sort of uh, gave people a bit more info in terms of the behind the scenes, process of free agent acquisitions. So it was interesting to see that they obviously couldn't get the player that they wanted to. It seems that in that off season, all the teams were vying to get Vulcan, and so C9 ended up with him, but they couldn't get the player that they wanted to get, and then they preferred to, instead of getting potentially an academy support or a lesser known support, they just kept their choice in house and got a role swap out of Keith. And go watch the video. It was a good video. It gave you a
It was
little bit of a
great.
look. Yeah, it gave you a look of teams' thought processes and whatnot. But I like you mentioned in the video, Keith literally says, oh, this is going to be, it's a new role for me. It's obviously going to take some time, and we're going to have to like roll with the punches, sort of. And then I think it was like week 5 when they just subbed him out, and I think it was a bit of a disservice to Keith because
Yeah.
they come in, ask this guy to play a completely new role that he doesn't presumably. I mean, he plays bot lane, so probably knows a little bit about support, but at the highest level, probably doesn't know really how to play support. And they say, "Oh yes, we're gonna work together. We're gonna try to make this work," and then they give him 5 weeks and sub him out, and it's a detriment to Keith's career.
Yeah, and their reasoning was that he's aggressive. We want an aggressive bot
Oh
lane.
yeah,
And
yeah,
this goes back to what we were saying with CLG, where we're like, we don't know the full process. What they did show, it seemed like all the supports were no longer available, and that was their last option. So you do have to give benefit of the doubt there. However, nothing too exciting for this team to moving forward. However, I would also say that closer performed really well. A lot of people actually talked about him as one of the top tier junglers from last split specifically. So while I would say nothing too much to be excited about, I think that is one area where Golden Guardians can feel happy is that they have a solid jungler from last split. He performed pretty well.
yeah. And I think, like you mentioned, with Demonte being added potentially, we don't exactly know what the situation with Demonte and Golden Glue is. If they're going to be
Right.
if they're like battling it out for the spot, or if Demonte is getting the start right away. But you know, Demonte, he's a good mid laner. He's a native NA mid laner, which is very lacking in terms of NA, as most of the NA mids are imports. And he's got Worlds experience. He went to Worlds with Clutch in season 9, and he's been to the playoffs a few times, and I think he's definitely better than Golden Glue. Like you said, Golden Glue I think led the league in isolated deaths. I think the two people
Yep.
who actually led isolated deaths were Golden Glue and Hanser. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember, I think that's what it was. So the two solo
You may
laners
be
for
right about that.
so the two solo laners for Golden Guardians, most isolated deaths in the whole entirety of the league. So maybe those get reduced with Golden Glue. I don't remember exactly, but Golden Glue died a lot last split, like a
Yes, he
lot.
did.
Like there were
Yeah.
many games where he would start the game like 0-3 or 0-2, and
Yeah.
like I mentioned before, mid jungle is so very important in the meta right now. So getting an upgrade at the mid lane will no doubt have a positive effect on this team. But I do think my reasoning for having them just outside of the playoff picture is just their overall roster in comparison to others.
Yeah. I just want to mention that it was also rumored that Demonte would be starting. However, that rumor is only a Reddit rumor, so there's not a lot of merit to
Validity.
be held there. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And to your point about ISO deaths, um, a lot of times it was him dying in side lanes as well, which like that completely kills your team's your strategy if you can't even hold your own in a side lane. Like how? Yeah. Anyways, your whole game plan completely crumbles if you can't hold your own in a side lane. And so maybe they decide they don't no longer want to play the split push game. Maybe they decide Demonte's perfect for this split push game, but that's something we'll have to wait and see for the upcoming games this split. Um, you good to move on to our next team?
Just one last thing that I had here is they added
Yep.
Ole as
Right. Yep.
staff slash positional coach. I don't think it was exactly clear, but I remember I read that on Reddit the other day, and I just looked it up just to make sure. But yeah, he's on their staff now, so good. He can maybe provide. He's a good support. I think he's all right.
Yeah.
Gets more flack than I think he deserved back on like the TL days.
I agree.
And he was like, even before he joined TL, he was like the best player on Immortals back in season 7. Him and Flame were kind of doing it up. So I think, another positive that they added, but like I still say, I think other teams have better overall rosters, and that's my reasoning
Yeah,
for having them just outside the playoff picture.
and more to be excited about, right?
Yep.
So there's that. Moving on, next on the list is 100 Thieves. You had them at 6, I had them at 8. Tell me why you think 100 Thieves is making the playoffs.
Well, again, I think for one thing, I think Someday is just really, really good. I think that guy he really knows how to play. Like we mentioned with Golden Guardians and isolated deaths, knowing how to play the weak side of the map is really important nowadays, like knowing how to control your weak side, strong side, and allowing that map pressure to sort of lead to, you know, pushing up vision or dragging enemy team around, and various things. I think if you just take a look at, you know, top teams in NA or even around the world, just usually their weak side play is very, very good. And I think he's a good strong side player. He's very good with resources. We've seen him pop off on many, many carry champions, and he's solid. I don't think he has too many weaknesses. He can play tanks. He can play carries. I think he's the second best top. They didn't make any roster changes. The only notable thing is that they re-signed him through 2022, and
Yeah,
I have faith in this roster. I think someday, along with Cody Sun and Meteos, I know Meteos didn't have that great of a split last split, but he's sort of known as this rock solid jungler that again, he's not going to blow the game wide open, but he's not usually going to int the game, and he's very good about communicating. He's been in the LCS all the way since summer season 3. He's a super, super knowledgeable guy, and he's got so much experience that I think it's hard to break him. And I have faith in their strong points of this roster and someday Meteos and Cody Sun.
yeah. And so for me personally, I did put them 8th. However, to me, that is their floor. Like, I can see this team making the playoffs. I can see this team actually even going anywhere from 5 to 8 is where I would peg them. However, the reason I did put them at their floor is because of just downward trends as far as performance is concerned when it comes to I want to say they're bot lane, but although we didn't really have a lot to go off of from stunt, but Cody Sun definitely looked worse this split, and also so did Meteos, as you mentioned. It just didn't seem right. Some of their performances, they seemed, um, I guess, just lackluster, honestly. And I do think that locking up Sunday is a great acquisition for them in the long term. They got him for a few years now. I think that's one of the best offseason signings in the league. However, even though I thought um, mid laner name, please,
Ryoma.
Ryoma, I did think Ryoma performed a lot better than people expected. Um, it still wasn't anything spectacular. There was a couple pop-off performances, but for the most part, it was meh, you know? So I don't see this team doing anything too special. And I do think a lot of their games, another reason why I put them at their floor is because a lot of their games last split, I remember correctly, were just like they were losing these games and they were just thrown given to them. I remember one specifically against Immortals. Immortals had a huge goal lead and should have been able to close out the game, and they were just gifted the win. And there was another one as well, but I can't remember the team where 100 Thieves was hard losing the early
I think it
game
was
and
against
definitely deserved to lose the game. However, somehow came out with a win. So um, that would be the reason why I have them at 8. But like I said, I can see them falling anywhere from 5 to 8.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned with, wins sort of being thrown to them, I also like vice versa to that. I do think there were plenty of games in the regular season and in the playoffs where they had a substantial lead to which they threw to the enemy
Yeah.
team. Like if you're like, oh my God, like that the playoff series between 100 Thieves and TSM, like it was just
Oh.
no, it was a clown fiesta. Like if you know what I'm
Yes.
saying, if you watch that series, God, that was tough to watch. I remember I'm pretty much almost all of the games. I think 100T had the lead in that game, and they threw it.
Yeah.
I think maybe only one game they didn't have the lead where they threw it to him, but yeah, I do think I think there's more to be happy about when you throw a game to somebody as opposed to getting smashed or getting a game thrown to you. So and that's part of like where I do think I have faith in the coaching and the management of Zix and Papa Smithy. I think Zix, he sort of recently he's flying under the radar. I know like he sort of got his name back from the CLG days when they finished second at MSI in
Mhm.
2016. But he was a solid coach for CLG, and I remember when they originally kicked him, I think it was just because they needed some type of change and they felt that he was that change. But I think he had an all right run on TSM. TSM, we'll get into them later. Super dysfunctional, but again, he got the boot from TSM. But I think he's a solid coach. He's definitely in the top 5 or top 4 coaches in the league, and Papa Smithy is one of the most well respected figures in the League of Legends scene from almost every single region, and I have faith that these two can help fix up some of the problems that they had in spring, and we'll be able to succeed in summer by making playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there as far as like the coaching staff and management. Um, One thing of note was that I find it really difficult to judge coaching in the LCS. From our point of view, we're not in all of these, meetings and scrims and all this stuff. All we see is like a YouTube VOD, right, of like the heist or
Yeah.
something like that. So it's really difficult from our point of view to say just how viable or how much impact a coach has on the team. However, when you hear other coaching staff or other players talk about Zix, there's always nothing but respect for the work ethic that he puts in. And so he's become like a really well-known coach in the scene just because of his professionalism and word of mouth from his peers. And so, to me, that is the only way or the most accurate way we can judge a coach from our position. And so, I couldn't agree more that I think they're in good hands when it comes to coaching and their management side. There's nothing but good things said about those two individuals being Papa Smithy and Zix.
And just one quick point, I think, before we move on, is you mentioned that Ryomo was on a bit of an uptick, moving from the start of the split to the end of the split, and like I mentioned, Meteos was on a little bit of a downtick. So I think if Meteos is able to get back to his normal solid performances, and with Ryoma continuing to improve, because he's still like a really green player, like he just came from OCE at the start of only last split, and I think he was definitely in the upper half of mid laners by the time the split ended. So I think 100 Thieves has, if you're a fan of 100T, think you got some hope for this season.
Yeah, it's not all doomed. I couldn't agree more. Next team on the list is EG. This is where our power rankings happen to mirror themselves, which
Yeah, kind of,
surprisingly
kind
to
of,
me, honestly.
kind of unexpected. I didn't think that we'd be
Yeah,
so similar.
neither did I.
The big,
However, EG, what do we got on EG?
so I guess the big marquee thing for EG this offseason is that they picked up Huni. The After Dig dumping his contract, EG picked it up and restructured it. So the big question is Huni starting? Is he playing academy? And how that sort of looks.
Yeah, I will be. Let's just say I'll be disappointed if he is starting. Um, and that's not just because I don't think Hooney is a great top laner anymore. I do think he is far past his pop off days. However, if Hooney is starting, you have to wonder what they do in the AD carry role because he is still an import slot. In mid lane, you have Jizuke, who's an import, and the Academy mid laner for EG is also an import. So the only person that you can take out of the roster if you put Hooney in is Bang. And I don't know if I can ever see a world where Bang, who was, I would say, probably your second best performer behind Jizuke, gets replaced this upcoming split. Either way, if Hooney starts, Bang or Jizuke has to come out, and they were hands down their best two players last split. So I would be really surprised to see it happen. However, we don't know exactly what's going on in that team because there was rumors that Bang wasn't exactly happy with the team he was playing with, and there was also the one video that was released where Bang said, "I can't control my teammates," kind of in a toxic way. I know that they did make a statement later, and they tried to say his intentions weren't to throw his teammates under the bus. However, like it's hard to not read the writing on the wall when you watch that video. You're thinking, "Whoa, not everything's good in the EG team right now." So you got to wonder if one Bang is happy, And if he's not, is he sticking around and is Tooney going in and who's going to replace him at AD?
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit surprised originally when they even picked up Hooney because I didn't feel that any roster changes were necessary with this team. They finished third. Um, they had originally beaten FlyQuest in the first round of the playoffs, and then they lost to them when they rematched in the best of five
Right.
before the finals.
Yeah.
I think it was 3-1. But
I think you're right.
yeah, I mean, it was just really confusing, honestly, because I think EG, they performed much better um, at the end of the split than they had at the start of the split. Specifically, Kumo, that guy was running it down a little bit at the start of the split. I think the EG started off 1-5, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty
I
sure
can't recall. I
they
can't
either they
remember
either
how
they
their
either
start
started
was.
off 1-4 or 1-5, and they ended the split 10-8. So like going 9-3 or 9-4 over your last 13 games is very good.
Yeah,
And
it's promising.
like you mentioned, Jizuke and Bang were their best performing players. Jizuke was even considered, an MVP candidate in the voting. Obviously, we knew it was going to be someone from C9, but he was still in the conversation for MVP and deserved, I think, because he did have some pop-up performances. I remember his LeBlanc was really, really good. Uh, Last split,
He
that
was
was one of.
pulling a lot of Rise bands.
Mhm,
A lot of Rise bands.
and he's got that pocket pick echo, which I'm all about that. But
Yeah.
he was an MVP candidate, and as you mentioned, Bang was their second best player. So it, you know, it. I'm interested to see where they go with this Hooney acquisition, and if they're going to start him, and what that means for the rest of the roster. Like you said, Jizuke is an import slot, Bang is an import slot, and Hooney is an import slot for, I think you mentioned it was half a split more. Is that correct?
So that was on Hotline League. They were talking about it, and the GM from it was CLG's GM in the chat said Hooney is an import for half of a split, and that caused everyone in the chat and in the call to say, "How is someone an import for half a split?" So it doesn't really make sense. We don't know if he was trolling or not, but that was one thing that CLG's um, GM said. I think towards the end of the show they did try to say that he's actually just an import for the rest of the split, but I don't know how that works. What I do know is that as of right now, he's still an import slot.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the academy mid laner for EG Giyu, who was, he was actually supposed to be, he was only brought in now. He was supposed to be their academy mid laner for last season, but they actually had some visa problems with Giyu, so he didn't actually start he didn't start for their academy roster at all. And he's supposedly actually supposed to be a good player. He was a marquee acquisition in the academy scene, if you will.
Well, and that's where you got to wonder if he is like a good acquisition, like you're saying, and like other people have said. You got to wonder why maybe some other lower tier teams haven't gone after him to try to pick him up. But that's a discussion for another time. The other last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to EG is Sven Skaren's performance this last split. Um, Coming off of a 2019 MVP split, he was someone that I think a lot of people were expecting to carry the Evil Genius squad, and he was just kind of there. I wouldn't say he was terrible. There were some games where he was terrible, but there was also some games where he was definitely like an important piece. But definitely, you got to start to wonder if, as you said earlier, if he's now a byproduct, or if his MVP split was a byproduct of being part of Cloud9, or if it was a byproduct of being an MVP. And I think that he'll want to redeem himself this split coming up and prove to everyone just why he was given the MVP award in summer 2019.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to look at former C9 players and where they've gone now. Like yeah, like we've mentioned before, Golden Glue was in the duoing
Yep.
with Sven Skaren with C9 in season 8, and moving on to Golden Guardians, he hasn't looked the best. Uh, Kumo was on C9, played 4 games in 2019 when Licorice had like a wrist injury, and he started off poor, but kind of worked his way up there a little bit to more of a
Yeah, he was
upper
so. Yeah.
to average to above average sort of performance at the end of the split. And Sven Skaren being, like we said, he had some good games, he had some bad games, but he was just kind of average. There was nothing really special with him. We didn't really see there were, there weren't any signs of his MVP ness around. There was a little bit, but there was also some bad games, like you mentioned. So
Yep.
it's kind of interesting to see these former C9 players and to track them and where they go and how they're performing.
Yep. Yep. I couldn't agree more. Are we ready to move on to TSM now?
I guess, well, just one thing we mentioned, if, like we said, Jizuke's import slot and their Academy mid's import slot,
Yep.
if they were going to put in Huni, Bang would be the odd guy out. And where do you think Bang could possibly go if, Huni would get slotted in?
So I don't think Bang would actually go anywhere just because the season is so close to a start. The season starts in 4 days. If you pick up Bang now, you gotta question why hasn't this move been made a couple weeks ago rather than right now to get some practice in before the season starts. I actually can't believe I'm about to say this, but if Huni gets subbed in, I think Bang will play for Academy in EG, which is like I cannot picture Bang going from world champion SKT all the way to Evil Genius being an academy player.
He's Piglet 2.0.
Yeah, you gotta wonder what's going on over there. I certainly hope not, because he had a good split. He didn't have a great split when he first came to the LCS and was playing for 100 Thieves, but last split he looked pretty good, and like we said earlier, he was probably their second best performer on the team and had some good performances. I can't see a world where they send him to Academy, and I can't see a world where they sub in Huni, but only time will tell.
Yeah, again, I just don't think it's worth to if you're subbing in Huni to relieve Kumo, I don't think it's worth having to get rid of Bang. Like the trade-off's not worth it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Okay, moving on to TSM, probably the most talked about and controversial team of the off season, getting
What an
Doublelift
org!
back. Yeah, they are, like I mentioned before, dysfunctional.
Yeah, so,
They don't know how to work their PCs. They don't know how to work their noise gates on Discord. They don't know how to make public statements. What else is there to talk about? Like
oh man, the list goes on.
they don't
So
they
for
don't know how to get a
let's just
jungler. They
sum
don't know how
this
to get
up
a
real
jungler.
quick. Let's sum it up real quick for those that don't know exactly everything that went in. We won't dive into it too much because it's been beat to death. But pretty much there was an issue with moving players in the off season. Their ex jungler Dardoch had some information leaked about himself from the president, TSM Lena, who happens to be dating Doublelift. She leaked information that no team wanted to sign Dardoch, and then all hell broke loose because obviously she just lowered the value of one of their players. And this was like a week after so much talk about having potential conflict of interest issues, and then she showed, like I said, just a week later exactly what the issue is with her being the president of TSM and dating their star player Doublelift. It's been just an absolute disaster, and then their PR hasn't been too great either. They came out with a few statements which kind of contradicts their actions.
On
And
Twit by the way, Twit
yeah,
longer.
on Twit longer as well. Yeah, anything else you want to add to that fiasco?
Dude, it's just ridiculous the way that they handled they've done everything that's happened. They've done it in the worst way possible.
Yeah, they have not done a good job of showing professionalism in an industry that is just begging or just trying so hard to prove that it's like, a real industry. They don't shine a good light on professionalism, and as being TSM, like the NA org that people know and love, it's a little disappointing to see, but I think that's enough on that, and we'll try to talk a little bit more about their roster moves and why we both slotted them in the 4 spot for our power rankings.
Yeah, so like we said, Doublelift back in AD instead of Kabe, who went back to EU. He's on Misfits now, and they brought back Spica from Academy, back up to their
Speaka.
Spica from their LCS roster. He was playing LCS at the end of Season 9 summer, and then he was back in Academy on Season 10 spring, and now he's back in the starting spot for Season 10 summer.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. So this is another team that I think can finish higher than fourth. I do think fourth, maybe fifth is their floor, but I would probably say fourth is their floor, and they have the potential to finish anywhere from top 2 to top 4. However, the reason I do put them in the fourth spot still is because I think their biggest issue, like we were just talking about Dardoch, um, I think their biggest issue is still the jungle, and I'm not totally sure that they fixed that problem by putting in Spica. And so even though yes, you've upgraded from Kabe to Double Lift, and actually while we're on that topic, we could say upgrade as far as the Kabe versus Double Lift topic because Doublelift did not have a good split last split. He was one of the lowest performer AD carries. However, people are still calling it an upgrade, myself included, simply because of how much, just his history within the league and how much, well, how many championships has that guy won, right? He's always been a huge part in championship teams, and so I still do consider it an upgrade. However, like I was saying, they haven't fixed the problem in the jungle, and so I'm hesitant to put them in the top two or top three spot competing with Cloud9. But it should be interesting. We're going to learn real quick with the upcoming games if they can compete with TL, and we're going to learn a little bit about those two teams in that matchup.
Yeah, one thing I think was super interesting, and another reason why Doublift was a big underperformer, specifically at the start of the split, was the huge switch up in the bot lane meta and how that sort of affected, you know, bot lane as a whole. Because, the season started and, in preseason, we had two new ADs slot right into the game, and it was Doublift struggled. I know he in his own video said that he didn't think he was playing that badly, but I think most people can agree in those first 4 games of the regular season, where I think Double played like 4 games of Senna or 3 games of Senna, he didn't look very good.
No.
And it'll be interesting to see what the bot lane meta is. We're still seeing Senna and Aphelios. I mean, he's good at Aphelios, but we're still seeing Senna be a high priority champion with the fasting Senna sort of build where you have supports last hitting minions and Senna stacking the souls. And even with this new like disgustingly, shall I say, cancer Senna build that's now sort of emerged from like the midseason cup where you run grasp and you rush a frozen mallet. But like it'll just be interesting because it is, people do believe it's an upgrade, and especially with his previous experience being in TSM and working with Bjergsen, something that he says himself that Bjergsen is his favorite player that he's ever played with. And you know they're both looked at as top of the top in terms of LCS players. So it'll be interesting, but like you said, I think their jungle issue they have not fixed, and I think will still continue to be an issue moving forward in this split.
So a couple of things there when it comes to Double Lift. I think this is the first split that we're not 100% convinced that he's going to be the best AD carry in the league
Yep.
just after his last split. Now, we won't be surprised if he is. Um, well, maybe I would be actually after how good Sven performed last split, but we won't be surprised if he's a top tier AD carry anymore. But this split is the first one where we're like, I don't know what to expect out of this guy exactly. And another thing is, for something for TSM fans to be hopeful for is that there was a lot of talk that Doublelift wasn't happy playing Senna in the last split, and that his coaches continued to put him on Senna. I do remember a video of him specifically saying he hated playing Senna
Oh
and
yeah.
how there was no wave clear and so on and so forth. And then the next game, he's put right back on Senna. So you got to wonder if he's going to have a little bit more of a say in the drafting now that he's back on TSM. My belief is that he will, and that could be something that makes him go back to his comfort zone and maybe puts him back to one of the top performers in his role in North America.
Yeah, it's definitely, where I think in terms of Doublelift's career, this is like a pivotal split for him. Like
Yes.
if he fails again, with this, I don't want to say new TSM roster because it's still the core of it's the same, but with this somewhat revamped TSM roster, if they fail again and they fail to make Worlds, or even if they go to Worlds as like a second or third seed and they fail to make it out of groups, I think it'll be really telling, you know, with what's going to be
Yeah.
going on with the futures of Doublelift and maybe even Bjergsen for that matter. I know they just re-signed him, but still, this is Bjergsen's a guy who's touted as one of the best mids in the West, but has continued to fail at international competition.
Yeah.
So
And sorry, go ahead.
I think the expectation internally and by most fans is that TSM will make Worlds this year, and I think they don't, and who knows what's going to happen.
I think they don't either, but again, like I said, I won't be surprised if they do. And one of the things that we sort of touched on, but the thing that TSM fans have to be excited about is that they do have 3/5 of their old TSM roster that everyone knew and loved so much, and that they performed best with. That was where they had their 17-1 split, was with that roster. And
Hmm.
so now seeing that we have 3/5 of that roster coming back, it's something for TSM fans to feel good about. However, like I said, big question mark in the jungle, but we'll have to wait and see how that pans out in the upcoming split. Anything else before we move on to our
Yeah, and
third place
just
team?
yeah, I guess just more on TSM. I know I was talking about the meta a little bit, and like I said, I think the meta will be really important for
Mm.
how this team, plays. Like just going and looking back in the past, TSM has always been a team that is very slow to adapt to the meta. The way that, if you watch like their TSM Legends series, one thing that they're always like having a constant struggle with is trying out new things and just choosing to play the same thing over and over and over to get wins, but not really learning as much about new strategies, and that could be attributed to not doing too well at international competition. And
Yeah.
specifically, I think looking at Broken Blade, I think he's a really good player. He's a really good mechanical player. He's got great YouTube content. I really love his YouTube content. But
He's great.
you know, his if you remember his first split coming into the LCS, he was, I think, one of the best tops in the league when it was primarily just an entirely carry meta top lane. Like this is when like a reworked Aatrox just came out and was just the best champion in the game. You had overpowered Akali, which was again another one of the best champions in the game, and you had Vladimir, which at the time was one of the best champions in the game. So I think if the meta can suit him specifically to carry top laners and just I think he'll be able to roll a lot of top laners.
So you just jogged my memory of one of the things that I did want to touch on when it comes to TSM is a lot of people were talking about how Broken Blade has been their carry performer, and he's been the one where they want to give some resources to have some carry performances.
Hmm.
And there's a little bit of an issue with that because Doublelift has also been one to take resources and to be a carry performer. And so I don't think that can be a huge problem moving forward. I do think that both of them are solid enough players to be able to play the weak side of the map, or something of that nature. But I do think it's possible that it's a problem, so it's something to note.
Yeah, I was just gonna say one more thing, but I just forgot.
If it comes to you later on, we can come back to it if you want to move on to the next team.
Yeah, I can't remember. We'll move on.
If it comes back to you, just bring it up whenever, and we'll go with like that. So next on the list we
Oh,
have
I
Fly.
remember. I
You got
remember.
it?
Uh,
Okay, go ahead.
it was in terms of jungling for TSM. I wonder if we're just gonna see the same old from TSM junglers, and they're just gonna
Huh.
get stuck on tanky, engaged junglers, or if we're gonna see, more diversity within their drafting. I think when Dardoch was originally brought into this team, it was sort of like, oh, okay, we're gonna get this aggressive jungler who can play all the he was a good Lee Sin player. He was a good Nidalee player back in the day. No, Nidalee's not really in the meta anymore, but he was a good carry jungler player that did a lot of things on the map. And we sort of noticed in his tenure with TSM that he just got stuck on, your default tank engaged junglers like the Jarvans and the Sejuanis.
And Dardoch definitely did not look to be in sync with the rest of the team. So I actually don't think it takes too much to have a better performing jungler just with how bad Dardoch was. And that's not to say Dardoch's a bad player, but you could tell he didn't fit with that roster.
Yeah, and he
And to your point with junglers, which jungler has fit with that roster since Svenskeren left after the 2017 season?
none.
That's the biggest issue, is that they haven't had one that actually fits. And so you bring up a really good point there, is this just going to be another jungler that is in and out after one split, or of two splits maybe? It's definitely something that TSM fans have to worry about.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I
Okay.
think we're good with that.
Next up on our list, we have FlyQuest coming in at the 3 spot. Can you believe, actually, that we have FlyQuest at the number 3 spot? Like, if this would have been last year, if you would have told me that multiple people are putting FlyQuest to go to Worlds, I would have been like, you're crazy. Like, there's no way that FlyQuest is going to Worlds. But it's looking like they have a shot for the first time in the org's existence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember. I think I know just you and me, like we were just talking like way back when about what we thought of FlyQuest and what we thought they were gonna finish in spring 2020, and I'm pretty sure I had them as like ninth or 10th, I'm pretty
I
sure.
was gonna say I thought you had them 10th.
I think I had them ninth or 10th, and I was, really surprised by their play. I think,
I think I had them 7, but I've also always been pretty generous to FlyQuest. I've always been a FlyQuest fanboy, so to speak.
yeah,
So
their two free agent acquisitions from spring 2020 have, turned out to do very well. They're their two best performing players in Power of Evil and Ignar. I think Ignar was a huge reason why they performed so well, specifically in the playoffs. I think that guy was just popping off almost every game. His recon play was really, really good. I remember from watching various playoff series, and PoE is just. I wasn't sure if he was going to do as well on FlyQuest as he did with CLG, but he's still solid. He's your typical control mage player. He's got his quirky little picks, but I think
is
they're going into the split.
Nasher's
Nash Tooth
Nasher's Tooth
Oriana,
Oriana. Yeah.
it's a banger. But yeah, I think they're moving into this next split in a really good position, and I think again, like we said with Solo, getting the starting spot over Viper
Yeah.
during the back half of the playoffs. They performed much better with Solo in there, and I think
Yeah.
moving forward, they're going to be a team that I think has world's aspirations.
So I couldn't agree more that I think that the change over to solo is something that's good for the team. I'll be a little disappointed if we don't see Viper on any LCS team this split if he doesn't get the starting spot over at Dignitas, just because I want to see his Riven sometime. Like you gotta see Viper's Riven. However, for the betterment of the team, I do think solo is an improvement. They were a team that performed, I would say, well, not amazing, but they performed well throughout the split, and I do think that it is now an improvement with solo over Viper, and I think that's one of the reasons why I have them going to Worlds. I also think that PoE has not been given enough credit until now. Like ever since joining the LCS, he has been on bad teams and has still had carry performances on those bad teams. And it only seems like now that he's getting the recognition, now that he finally brought a team to the finals. Um, because when he played with Optic, he did have some great performances, and that was not a strong roster, that Optic team. Same thing with CLG. I didn't think they were great. I still can't believe Wiggly was being talked about as one of the better junglers in the league at the end of last year, and I think this year has proven why I thought that way. But yeah, I think since he's joined the LCS, Power of Evil has been one of the better performing mids, and I think that's going to continue. So it's something to be really excited about. And to your point about Ignar, not only was that guy playing well, but you couldn't ban him out, man. His
Yeah,
champion pool was massive, and so you didn't know what to do against that guy, and that's a real weapon, being able to play anything and to perform at a high level. It's something really exciting for FlyQuest fans, and so I hope to see a new team going to Worlds in FlyQuest. I think that would be great. And we'll have to see because they have a really tough start to their split. Because as some of you may know, you always have a rematch of the finals, and so their first game is this Friday against the Cloud9 Behemoth that went 17-1 last split.
yeah. Just in terms of Ignar, as you're mentioning, like his champion pool was so deep, and like you said, you couldn't ban him out. It was really just remembering back to the playoff series and watching those, like he was drawing multiple bans. Like
Yeah,
when FlyQuest was blue side, they were drawing multiple bans. Like red side was having to ban out two support champions in the first rotation of bans, which I think is really really important and gives you such a huge draft advantage over the
yeah,
enemy team. When think about just like the marquee champions that are in the meta, most of them are usually junglers or whatever the insert OP solo laner at the time. Like it's really important when your support can be drawing bans.
yeah, absolutely. And one other thing that I think FlyQuest fans can be excited about, I don't think this is like something huge, but I think it's worth noting is that time and time again, I've heard it 3 times now where C9 has come out and said their favorite scrim partner is FlyQuest. Now, what does that mean, right? Well, what it means is that they're going to get the most opportunities to practice against the best team in North America. And if that's not the best opportunity to improve, then I don't know what is. You're not going to get better practice than playing against Cloud9. And clearly, if Cloud9 is going to come out and say that, that's because they're playing against good opponents and they're getting good practice themselves. So I think that you have a team that has performed well, you have the top team in the league that's giving them respect, and you're going to be able to practice against that top team more so than other teams, seeing as you're the favorite scrim partner of that team. So, and like I said, I don't think that's anything huge, but I do think that is noteworthy, and that is something that is going in the favor of FlyQuest to improve and to have a shot to go to Worlds.
Yeah, it's super valuable when the top team in your league is talking about you as another top team. Like they've said that they think they're their toughest scrim opponent, and that just bodes well for FlyQuest. It makes other teams also want to scrim them, which I think is important. There's all this talk about like the scrim meta and how teams coordinate scrims, and it's quite difficult if you're a bottom team to get good scrims. But think about it. If you were just if you were an LCS team at the start of spring or in the middle of spring, like you wouldn't think of like, oh, I want to go scrim a good team. Who are we going to scrim? Like you wouldn't think of FlyQuest, but C9 is sort of giving them that respect that they deserve.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
And I guess,
Anything else?
yeah, just one last point I just wanted to
Yep,
cover is back to
go for
Solo
it.
and him, gaining the starting spot is, you know, he's been sort of known as this toxic player.
Hmm.
Toxic in terms of solo queue. I know there's been plenty of I don't know, like screenshots on social media or Reddit posts about Solo and how he's toxic in like solo queue games, but he's just shown that he's clearly better than a majority of these LCS top laners. He was teamless at the start of the split, like no LCS team wanted to pick him up, so he was on FlyQuest Academy. But even myself, I always thought Solo was a great player. I just remember back to like the Echo Fox days when he was on Echo Fox and they were just a dumpster fire of a team, and he was their best performing player. He would constantly get leads against them. I remember when, like specifically when Kumo was playing for C9 and they were playing against Echo Fox and Solo was just getting hard camped and he was still managing to like get a CS lead over the enemy top who was getting jungle resources the entirety of the time and he was like solo killing Kumo and then Kumo was playing it was like GP versus Jace. Solo was playing
Yeah.
GP against Kumo's Jace and Kumo was just getting like hard camped. Like Svenskeren was just like all over Solo, but Solo was still managing to pull out a lead. And I think it's kind of the question if is it worth having a somewhat toxic player on your team if they're going to be if they're going to be a better player than others. We've sort of seen that in the past with Dardoch. He's known as the super toxic player, and that's sort of been the reason why until this last split he was in academy for a full year. But now he's sort of been back on the LCS stage, obviously underperforming with TSM, but teams do seem afraid sometimes when players gain this notion of, oh, they're toxic, therefore
Yeah.
we should not be signing this player whatsoever. He's gonna fuck with our team. He's gonna ruin the chemistry or potentially like ruin a mental of a player, which would be really bad. But in FlyQuest's case, I think it's working out here.
Yeah, and I think those are totally warranted worries. I think that although you were saying that there's rumors about him being toxic in solo queue, there was also rumors about him being toxic on his LCS teams as well, which is something that is it becomes more of a worry when your team isn't doing well. There's never too many issues if your team's winning, right? I guess the biggest issue is what if anything goes wrong and suddenly this team starts to fall out of a playoff spot? Then what kind of top laner do you have as far as mentality goes, right?
Hmm.
Toxicity is always an issue, but it's definitely more of an issue when things aren't going well. So you have to wonder if, everything's great to start the split, but then one little thing goes wrong and if things just start to build up tensions start to build up and things just go the wrong way from that point. Or if they do eventually make worlds and now you're playing against a lot of difficult teams to beat, right? What happens at worlds if you do make it and things aren't going your way? Now you've got a toxic player who's frustrated, who's tilted, who knows what that looks like. And this is all speculatory, but it's definitely a valid concern.
Yeah, it's also kind of that trade-off, like as you're saying on like an international level, like would you rather have a worse top laner that may be a little bit better of a teammate or a higher skilled top laner that's potentially a little bit toxic. You gotta,
Yeah.
you gotta weigh the two and see what you think is worth. And maybe that's how it works. Like teams, they do this, that's, part of their decision process is weighing, is it worth putting, potentially toxic player on our team to have potentially better results?
Yeah, and it's a tough question to answer. Fortunately, that's not our job. We good to move on?
Yep.
Okay, number two on the list, we both put TL. How has Team Liquid made it back up to the number two spot on both of our power rankings?
Yeah, I was me myself. I thought this was going to be like hugely controversial when you
I know. I'm
obviously
like,
don't
oh,
pull
I'm
this up.
unique, you know? Like, no,
But
no.
yeah, like we said, TSM was sort of the number one talked about team of the offseason. TL was kind of number two.
Yeah.
They had a lot of big name changes within their organization. Doublelift obviously gone to TSM. Tactical moved up from Academy, and then I think one of the more surprising moves that I don't think anybody saw coming was Jat. You know, TSM Jat is
I
now
definitely
TL
didn't see it coming.
is TL's new head coach with their former head coach Kane now becoming I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's just assistant coach. Maybe it's like more strategical coach. I don't know exactly, but he's some sort of assistant coach now.
They have said that they plan to keep all of the coaching staff, but they clearly, after what was released with the double lift issues between him and coaching, they clearly felt that the communication to players was not good enough, and that they wanted someone who could communicate effectively with their players. And I think Jad is clearly one of those guys. To me, I think it's actually a great signing. I think Jad is someone that is level-headed, and I think that he can converse with his players and get the information that they need out of a coach. So to me, I think it's a great sign, but it will be interesting to see Jat, someone who we've seen in just not a coaching role for so long, to see what he pulls out in his drafting and in his mentality with his new players.
Yeah, I sort of look at this move as kind of like a Weldon 2.0. It's like you have this super obviously smart and level-headed guy that
Yeah.
actually has some League of Legends knowledge as opposed to Weldon.
Thank you. Okay.
Like he actually knows what he's talking about in the game. Like from what I
Yeah.
know, I'm pretty like he's not like a bad player. Like I think from what I remember them talking about, he's like a Diamond 2, Diamond 1 player. So he's not like
Yeah, he
he's not a
plays at a high
scrub.
diamond level.
He's not
Anything
a scrub.
spectacular, but
So
yeah. I definitely like the distinction. I wouldn't call him a Weldon 2.0. I like your distinction about how he's got a little bit more knowledge to the game than Weldon does. I do think he definitely brings more to the team as far as knowledge of the game, which I do think is important. Yes, you have the other coaching staff that have plenty of knowledge of League of Legends, but it definitely does not hurt to have someone else give their input as long as it's like um an informed input, and I think Jat's got a good mind for League, and so I think it's a great sign. Another thing that I've heard talk about is how Doublelift will be hungry to come back and beat his former TL team. Um, I'm not too huge on the hunger arguments, but I will say that if we're going that route, I think you could argue the exact same thing the other way, that all the players on TL are definitely hungry to prove themselves this split. They got embarrassed. They finished ninth, man, and they're probably one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive
oh, they are
roster
by
ever
far.
in League of Legends. So they got embarrassed, and I think that all of them will come back hungry to perform better. Impact had a really bad split, and while I do think Impact isn't at his peak that he's been at in the LCS, I do not think he is as bad as he looked last split. And that's just one of the players. I think all of them will look good. The only question mark really is tactical because we haven't seen a lot of him.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of their roster on an individual basis, like you said, Impact, he did have a really rough split, but he is, again, if you take a look at his overall resume, he's one of the top, I'd easily put him in still the top three of top laners in NA with Licorice, Someday, and himself. He's definitely in the top
Yeah,
three. He definitely had an underperforming split. But like you said, the whole main problem that specifically Doublelift and a lot of TL sort of came out and said was their internal communication and getting on the same page and whatnot. And I do think specifically with the top laner, like that's very important because like I mentioned before, knowing how to play weak side and strong side is very important in the metagame right now. And if they can sort of get those problems back up, I think we'll see a very different impact coming up this split. And in terms
yeah,
of
for sure.
yeah, and then in terms of tactical, I think we only saw him play. I think it was just two games in. in spring. I think he went 1-1, and that was the week where Doublelift was sick or whatever, or he got benched and then he was sick. There was I don't remember exactly, but he was sick or
Yeah, me
benched or
neither.
something like that. But he went 1-1, and he looked real. I remember he was playing Misfortune on the game that they won, and he looked really good on it. But I think he's in good hands. Like he has Core JJ, former
Yes.
world champion, as a support. Like that guy is still, I'd put him right up there with Vulcan as best supports in NA. Overall, I still think Core JJ on an individual basis is probably better than Vulcan. Maybe not in tandem with bot laners, but Core JJ is easily number one, number two support in the league, and one of the better supports in the world. I think you could still say.
Well, and I think it'll be interesting to see if TL does in fact bounce back like you and I are both expecting. It'll be interesting to see if he challenges Vulcan for the number one support spot on the all whatever team
All
that they
pro.
call it. Yeah, the all pro team. Because going into last split, I think people would have unanimously said Core JJ and Vulcan would have been close behind. However, after last split, it was pretty obvious who was the best support in the league, and that could be attributed to TL just performing so weak as a team that there's no way for Core to prove himself, especially with an AD carry who lacked motivation.
Yeah. Just I know I spoke about this a little bit earlier with TL's dysfunction. It caused a lot of, shifts in the standings. Like I just wrote down a lot of their like notable losses. Like they lost Immortals twice, they lost to Golden Guardians once, they lost to CLG once, and they lost to Dignitas once. So like there is just like that's 5 games right there, which in all likelihood, if TL was performing at their normal level, like that could be like plus anywhere between 3 to 5 extra wins that would have been on their
Yeah.
split. So even though they finished ninth place in a 7-11 effort, I think if they can, fix up some of these communication problems they have, and this substitution with tactical doesn't go like just doesn't like shit doesn't hit the fan, like think that they're easily within a playoff spot. And we both have them as two. I think that's as high. I don't see them finishing above C9. But I mean again, and it wouldn't be a complete surprise if they weren't number two and maybe they were four or something like that.
So one of the interesting things for me is that despite the fact that I put them above TSM and that I do think they'll outperform TSM, I do think the TL floor is lower than TSM's after what we saw last split.
I'd agree with
Because
that.
yeah, you want to throw a lot of the blame on having an AD carry that wasn't motivated and whatnot. But like we said before, it wasn't just Doublelift that was performing poorly. It was pretty much across the board some poor performances. A lot of people still gave a lot of credit to Jensen. He seemed like their best performer, and I agree. He still seemed like he was performing at the level that he should. However, there's still 4 other players outside of Doublelift to look at when you're looking at what the problem was. And so I do think that I could see that team falling. I don't see out of playoffs. I don't see that happening again. I could see them falling as low as 5, but to me, I still put them in the 2 slot. I think they're going to be good this split. And I want to touch a little bit on Broxa
Yeah, I was gonna
and
say that as
uh,
well.
more so just because um, that guy did not come to NA to miss playoffs twice or to fail twice. I promise you that guy is fired up and ready to go for the next split coming up. I'm really interested to see what Broxa can do with a new roster that doesn't have any motivation issues. I think it'll be interesting to see how he performs and see if maybe he comes out with some pop-off performances or some carry performances in the jungle. But we'll be seeing that soon.
Yeah, originally when TL's failures, like at the start of the split, people kind of attributed that to Broxton not being there, and then when he had got there, it was like, oh, he's only just got here, he's barely played scrims, he still hasn't, really connected with the team. And while those are, I think, somewhat valid, like Broxa wasn't in any ways like a bad performer. He wasn't like amazing, but he was just average. But I do think moving forward in this sort of uh, again, this they've TL believe they've sort of fixed their problems and eliminated this, you know, they've eliminated Doublelift with his supposed lack of motivation. So I think moving forward, like you said, all these TL players want to prove to the rest of the league like they are still this top team.
Hmm. Absolutely. Anything more before we move on to our last team?
No, I think that's it.
Well, as no surprise, we both put Cloud9 in the number 1 spot. I don't think there's going to be too many people out there that aren't putting Cloud9 in the number 1 spot. A lot of people were saying last split was the best team the LCS has ever seen. That is obviously up for debate because the 2016 TSM roster was really good. However, I could definitely see the argument being warranted. They were hands down better than every other team they played. They took one loss to TSM, and pretty much unanimously, everyone agrees that it was attributed to a poor draft and that they drafted really poorly into and played themselves into TSM's hand. So
Hmm.
this is a team that didn't need to make any moves in the offseason, with having been probably, well, not probably, having been one of the best teams the LCS has ever seen.
Yeah, I think, it was definitely with the whole COVID situation. It was really, as a C9 fan, it was really sad to see them not be able to go to MSI just purely because, having them stack up against international competition, I think would have given everyone a better idea of, if this C9 roster or the previous TSM roster, who would have been the better team. It does kind of suck that both NA and EU and, the emerging regions as well missed out on an MSI. I know you said yourself you didn't watch the midseason cup, uh, but for the people who don't know, the midseason cup was just a tournament between LCK and LPL, and it was a good tournament. Top Esports won that, but it just sucked to see that there was no international play for NA and EU as well.
Yep. And some things of note is, well, are we going to see the same C9 from last split? Not as far as roster, but as far as performance. And because everyone talked so much about how they boot camped early and how they were the only team that was really ready to go before the split happened, I think it's worth noting that Vulcan and Sven are still number 1 and 2 on the solo queue rankings. Which, yeah, NA solo queue, what does it really mean exactly? But you can definitely see that their motivation is still there because, well, you have to hold your spot somehow, and that's by playing more and more games, right?
Yeah,
So
Sven has two accounts in the top four spots of Challenger. He's got one account
yeah,
with 1700 LP and another account with like 1450 LP. So
yeah.
it's
So if
kind of crazy.
anybody's coming into this split wondering if C9 still has their fire, so much more so like, oh, well, they won their one split, are they happy now? The answer is no. They're not happy until they go to Worlds, and they want to perform well at Worlds.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't as dominant coming into the split. Like maybe again, like I said, it doesn't seem like there are any signs that they've sort of taken a break or aren't motivated. But it is difficult to follow up. Like they just rolled everybody. They rolled
Yeah.
everybody pretty
Well,
much.
and you
Minus
gotta
that one
wonder like
TSM game.
what is not a successful season for C9? If C9 goes 14-4, is that a success still? Or if they go, I don't know, 12-6, is that a success? Where do you put a successful season for C9 after following up with a 17-1 split in spring?
Yeah, I think just in terms of measuring their success, it'll be very interesting to see how they stack up on these new look TL and TSM teams, and even FlyQuest for that
Hmm.
matter. I know we saw the
Yep.
finals with C9 and FlyQuest was a 3-1, but like we said, like they only lost two games in the whole split. Like, and that's pretty hard to follow up. Like if they're 14-4 and maybe the second place team is only 10-8 or 11-7, and let's say they 2-0'd that team, or however it falls, like I think they're expected to be the number one team in NA in terms of regular season standings. I'd be pretty surprised, honestly, if they weren't the number one team.
Yep.
But I don't know if we'll necessarily see the, the really like dominating split that they had, because they were just rolling people left and right.
Yeah, and for me, before we close out the power rankings segment, I do think that my answer to that question would be I think a 14-4 split is fair, and I think anything for that or better is what should be expected. Anything below 14 wins, I think, would be a little disappointing. However, that's easy to say before we see just how good TSM and TL are this split, like you just mentioned.
Hmm.
Anything else before we want to move on to our next segment?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, so there you have our power rankings. We put CLG 10th and C9 first. Not too much, not too many surprises there in the power rankings. Not a lot of parity either. Moving on to our next segment, we're going to have the new award system for us. Heavily influenced by one other Stephen King, we have the Bean Soup Award and the Popoff Award. Do you want to explain what these awards mean, Nolan?
Yeah, so basically, like we said, we got our inspiration from the one and only Stephen King, Sketcher King Smoo. The list goes on of all of his names. But uh, but yeah, so the Bean Soup Award is basically just what we think is just like, it just and
Disappointment.
you disappointed. Like if it was like a week of LCS play, like you were the worst performing player, or if an org did something that was like really bad, like you could have given it to any of the number of things that TSM had done during the off season. And then our pop
And
off award is just what we're gonna have as our so-called like MVP for the week.
yeah, and it doesn't have to be too much more complicated than that. And so, for myself, the Bean Soup Award this week is going to go to none other than CLG for finishing last and then not making any moves, as we mentioned earlier. To me, this was an easy Bean Soup Award.
Yeah, I'm in agreement here. CLG as well. Like we mentioned in our talk about CLG, it's very surprising to see that you finished last place, dead last, and you didn't make any changes. It just doesn't really make sense.
Yep. And as for the Pop-Off Award, I'm giving mine to Dignitas as a team. I think they had a lot of things that they needed to change after last split. There was a lot of disappointments, and I think getting a bunch of new players is step one, and step two is getting rid of your current problems, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter which order. And I think getting rid of that big $2.3 million contract that they had on Hooney or under Hooney's name. He was definitely an underperformer, and I think getting rid of that contract is the right step is the right step in the right direction for that team. So I think so far, I think Dignitas is popping off in the off season. We'll have to see if it translates to more wins this upcoming split.
Yeah, I agree with the same thing, Dignitas, for the same reasons. But as we move forward with like when the LCS gets into its weeks, we're gonna have some different answers because we'll have our own views and opinions on how the week sort of played out.
Right. Yep. Yep. And moving on to our final segment, we have predictions. Do you want to pull up the schedule for
Yep.
the first week, and we'll go over each game. We'll make some predictions, and we'll also do our uh, our predictions as far as bets are concerned. We'll give you our bet that we think is worth taking. So there
Okay.
you have on the left, you have the two Friday night games. First one being 100 Thieves and EG. I got EG. What do you got?
I got EG as well, just based off.
Next.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
Yep.
That's fine. C9 versus FlyQuest. I think this is a bit of an obvious one. We got C9.
Yep.
Okay, Saturday, first game, EG versus CLG. I got EG.
EG all day.
And then TSM versus TL. Who do you got?
I got TL for sure.
I got TSM. I think
Yeah.
just I just got this feeling that Doublelift is just he's gonna want his revenge and he's gonna have a pop off in the first game.
Yeah, it will be interesting because I think both of those teams have reason to want to definitely beat the other team. I think it's a close match, but yeah, I still think there's a reason I put TL higher, and it's because I think they're gonna 2-0 TSM this split. We'll see if I'm wrong very shortly.
Hmm. Third game, FlyQuest versus IMT. I got FlyQuest.
FlyQuest.
Yep.
Yep.
Next, last game of Saturday, Golden Guardians versus Dignitas.
This one is close for me. I did think back and forth, but I did go with Golden Guardians ultimately.
Yeah, I went Golden Guardians as well. For me, just I like them in comparison to Dig, because with sort of like the unknown of Dig's roster, they might not be as well
Exactly.
practiced. So I got Golden Guardians.
Yeah, exactly. The next game, I got C9 over 100 Thieves on Sunday for the first match. I'm sure you do as well.
Yep, pretty obvious.
Next, we got TSM Dig.
I'm going Dig
You're going Dig over TSM.
for the upset.
Interesting.
TSM's always they always got to mess up somewhere. So
I do like the upset pick as far as if the odds are good enough, I wouldn't mind that as a bet. I'd have to rehash and look at the odds again, but I'm going to take TSM on that one.
next game, TL versus Golden Guardians.
I got to go TL here.
I agree, TL as well.
And
And
then the coin flip match.
yeah, this one's a coin flip.
Who do you got?
CLG.
I'll take Immortal. I don't know, man. Uh, my heart says CLG, my brain says Immortals, but well, my brain says they should both lose actually, which is a little harsh, but I'm gonna go Immortals.
Okay, well, there were our little quickfire predictions.
There's our predictions, and now for the last part, let's pull up the betting sheet.
Yeah, unfortunately, just to make sure that you guys on the stream can all see this, I gotta cover Blue Jay's beautiful face here. So
Oh no.
sorry, no Jamie for you guys. Wait, the picture ain't here. Hold up.
Take your time.
Technical difficulties here.
I can pull it up over here if you're having issues, just let me know.
Just
Um,
give me a sec here.
of course we would prefer to show it, but if not, that's not the end of the world.
No, we'll be able to get it.
Okay.
I here. This should go now. Okay, there we go. Got to cover up Jamie's face, but hopefully, I know the text is a little small, but hopefully all of you on the stream can sort of see it. But you
Yeah.
want to lead
So
off and what you think you're.
yeah, so the first one I got is Cloud9 over 100 Thieves there on the 14th at 4 p.m. I think that yeah, C9's favored and you're not getting a whole lot of bang for your buck. However, I do think that if Cloud9 plays 100 Thieves 10 times, it wouldn't surprise me if they win 10 out of 10, but I think they win 9 out of 10 of those games. And so I do think the 23 cents or whatever you're getting there, the 24 cents is more than worth a bet there. And I think there are some other notable ones, like the CLG one where you're getting 2-to-1 odds, or the Team Liquid one where you're getting 87 cents. I think those are both decent bets if you want to parlay those with Cloud9. But I think for sure the freest bet here seems to be the Cloud9 over 100 Thieves. Who do you got?
Yeah, just the main ones, just if you're. I would say they're a little bit riskier, but I think you can make some good money on is one Golden Guardians and Dignitas on the 13th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
I think that's like we said, it's a bit of a close matchup, but my reason for picking Golden Guardians over them in the first place was sort of the uncertainty with Dignitas and their roster, and that potentially a more practiced Golden Guardians will just be able to come in and be, more clean with their play and just maybe potentially lead to an easy win. So I'm going with that.
Uh,
And the second one that I have that is, I think, another pretty good one is Liquid versus TL versus Golden Guardians on the 14th at 6 p.m. Liquid's getting 144. I think it's pretty good. I think Liquid are by far better than Golden Guardians. I know even though they lost to them once last split, but I do think I have faith that TL will be able to fix up their problems and just purely on an individual like individual matchups, I think TL has better players in almost every role.
Yeah, I do think you might not get too many more opportunities to get TL on a weaker team with that kind of value if they start to perform better as the split goes on. But that'll wrap up all of our predictions and all of our bets for this week. Nolan, do you want to give a little outro and plug a little bit before we close down the stream and end our first episode?
Yeah, so just like we mentioned in the intro, like our podcast is just primarily going to cover the NALCS on a week-to-week basis and, all league news in general. And we're going to be doing it same time every week, same day, Monday, 3 p.m. EST. Be there, be square. You know what I'm saying? Just plug our Twitters real quick. Both of our Twitters are just under our face games, as you can see. Blue Jays, Jamie Savoy 13. I'm the Tuminator underscore after that. And then at the bottom, you can see our Twitter and YouTube links. Uh, the Twitter we're going to be using to potentially take any questions, like Twitter questions that we want to cover, or potential suggestions for topics in the future. And on the YouTube, we're planning on just uploading this as soon as possible so that you have a VOD for it. And we're going to leave the Twitch VOD up, but those get taken down after a certain number of days. But we are going to upload those to YouTube if you've missed out on the stream or you want to rewatch it and see any of the points that we made before.
And just a little quick thing just to add, sort of what you said, but don't be afraid to tweet at us, guys. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the games. and on any potential topics. If there's something you guys think we should cover on the show, we would love to hear from you guys. So send us a tweet. We'll be sure to read all of those, and hopefully, if you guys have any questions, we'd love to answer them on stream as well. So be sure to send any tweets. We're probably going to go over those tweets Sunday night after all of the LCS matches have been played. We'll sift through some of your guys' questions and comments.
Yeah, and then just to close it out here, we just wanted to give a quick little shout out to our boys Juru and the Vapire. They were helping us out with just, getting the stream set up and getting, some of the overlay stuff done. And then if you take a look sort of in the bottom right-hand corner, if you're wondering what that's been down there this whole time, it's our Ambush Esports logo. So if you don't know, Ambush Esports was an esports organization created by myself, Jamie, and the two people that we've mentioned before, plus one other person. Um, Primarily just doing some tournament organization. We originally started doing some Super Smash Bros. Tournaments in person, but after all this COVID stuff, we've now run a couple online tournaments. So just a quick shout out to the Vapire and Juru for helping us out with that, and just shout out our esports org a little bit. Anything else to add, Jamie?
Yeah, no, no, just thanks again to those two guys for helping us set up the stream. We are clearly not too well versed in running these kinds of streams, and so their help is really much appreciated. And well, let's be honest, it would be a lot more scuffed without their help. So
Oh
just a
yeah,
big shout
you
out to those two guys.
you guys should have seen the first little overlay that I made. It was nothing like this one.
Yeah. So if that's all for now, just want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we would love to hear you guys' feedback. If you guys know us, DM us, let us know what we could improve on. If there's any topics you guys want to talk about, again, use the Twitter. We'd love to get your guys' engagement and really appreciate you guys listening to our first episode.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening.
All right.